Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to try again after last week's plant chores debacle where I just really was not feeling it. I have some more plant chores that I need to do this week. Some things that I want to do / need to do in order to get into my autumn planty zone. And I thought it'd be great to do them along with you so that if you haven't thought about any of these things, now that we are going into a cooler, darker season of autumn and the upcoming winter, if you haven't thought about these things, then you can think about them as well and make sure your plants stay happy and healthy during this very dark time. So that's what's happening today. Before I get into it though, I want to say one, thank you all so much for the massive amount of love and support y'all gave me on my last plant chores video where I wasn't feeling it. It was a struggle to post it, but I was like, if one person out there feels like they understand, it'll be worth it, because then I'm just showing the reality of things. So I'm really grateful to have such a fantastic community of all of you, and it just made my heart so warm to receive those really lovely comments from you, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much, and we're gonna give it another go. Also, before we get into it, I want to say if you're new here and you don't know me already, hi, my name is Emma and I make houseplanty content all over the internet, so if you want to follow along with my houseplanty journey and maybe learn something along the way, stick around, watch some more of my videos, and subscribe to my channel. If you are not new here, welcome back. I really appreciate it. Let's get into autumn, y'all, because it's dark and it's cold, and because of those things we need to adjust our plant care. The first thing that I want to talk about is probably the thing that I noticed the biggest difference in. It is significantly darker in the autumn and winter time, especially here in the UK. The length of our days decreases quite a lot at this time of year when we're in October, sort of going down into the depths of winter. It's getting darker and darker and darker, and also even when it is daytime, there's typically more clouds out, it's raining more often, and so my plants are seeing the sun a whole freaking lot less. And so there's a couple of things that I do to help mitigate that, help deal with that sort of issue. You don't have to do anything. You really don't have to do anything, but I personally like to use grow lights to help boost the light that my plants are getting and help encourage them to continue growing over the growing season. You can see that I have a grow light just up there that I actually just installed this past weekend because I was worried about this sort of area not getting much light. You can see when I turn the grow lights off, it is dark in here. And so these things are not getting very much light. I'm not very far from a window. I'm currently sitting 2 meters away from a window. These plants are a meter and a half away from the window, and it is not very bright, and so I wanted to add some grow lights in there that could really boost the area a little bit. And I also wanted to add another one just in front of me, which I just got in the mail, and I'm actually really excited to give a go to. So this here is the Life Spectrum from Mother Grow Lights. They actually just sent this for me to try out with all of you. It's not sponsored, but they did send it to me for free, and I am an affiliate with them. I absolutely love my Mother Grow Lights. They are honestly some of the most fantastic, best looking grow lights I have in my home, and they have actually just come out with the Life Spectrum 32 grow light, and I'm really looking forward to giving it a go. And I thought it'd be fun for us to install it together. So the zone I want to put it in is this bit right here. It is a standing grow light. Once I open it up, I can show you that, but I've got my Plant Spectrum 16s on each of these shelves, save the bottom one. This one doesn't have one, but I figured if I put this grow light around here, I could get it to shine onto my Splendid as well as my pond box, and it'll help keep those plants lighter. So there's a quick start guide on the back here. I feel like all of the Mother Grow lights are some of the easiest ones to set up in my collection. They're just like very user-friendly. So this one is a different color. So all of the other Plant Spectrum grow lights I have from Mother are black, which I typically really like because I tend to go for black shelves and stuff. But this one is sort of silver and white. Also, one of my favorite things about Mother lights, I know this feels like an ad, but I'm just like obsessed with these lights. They give you all the different international plugs. So if I were to ever to move to a different country, if I wanted to move to Europe or the US or whatever, I could bring these lights with me and I wouldn't like lose out on them in the future, which is super duper, super useful because I feel like that's, with all of my other grow lights, they don't have adapters or anything, so I would just be like losing out on them a little bit. Let's pop you up and plug you in. So I've just kind of slotted it into this alcove, and now my Splendid here and the pond box can get the light they need. It also comes with this little smart switch thing, which if you download the app that it comes with, you can get it to go on with a sort of circadian rhythm. But I'm personally not going to be using that because I already have all of the grow lights in my whole home on a smart plug system already. If you've not got a smart plug system or even your grow lights on timers, I highly recommend it, especially for this time of year when you're probably going to be needing to turn them on more often than not. In order to get my plants to have consistent lighting, it's really nice to not have to worry about when I'm switching on and off the lights and just having them all set to go on at a certain time of day. The lights on this shelf here go on at 10 a.m. and off at 10 p.m. because this corner gets no light otherwise. I know it's like right up next to a window, but it might maybe get like an hour of light a day, which isn't enough really to grow plants on a regular basis, and so I need to have grow lights in this corner, and so these ones stay on for 12 hours a day. But most of the rest of the lights in my home, I have them on a schedule based off of the time of sunset, and so it changes throughout the year regardless of me paying attention to when sunset is. So the rest of them will go on an hour before sunset each day and then turn off at 10 p.m. when all of the other grow lights turn off. It's actually really funny when we have like people over or anything at 10 p.m. the lights, all of the lights in our home just switch off because they're all set to go off, and normally Joe and I are in bed during the week, and so it's just like lights off, time to go to bed. But when we're like not actually planning on going to bed at that moment, it's a bit of fun and silliness. But I also really love that I can control all of the lights from my phone. I have all the lights on the Meros Smart Surge Protectors, which I have talked about previously, but I'll link them down below. And with those, I can actually link it to the Google Home system. We have Google Home because we've got a Nest thermostat and Google Wi-Fi extenders, and so we tend to use Google Home as it is, but I can go and I can turn off this whole section or turn it on with just a click. And so if it is extremely dark in my home, which it tends to be these days, especially in the living room where those lights don't go on automatically until just before sunset, if I want a little bit more light, I can just go in and turn those lights on via my phone, and I don't need to worry about getting up and like finding the plug switch and whatever. So highly recommend to have some sort of automatic system. It makes my life so much easier, given I have probably more grow lights than the average person because I wouldn't say insane, I'm not insane. But I really like having them on. I don't use any of the top lights in my home, the ceiling lights, because I don't like the light on them. I'd much rather this sort of cozy, like, day glow of lamp kind of situation. So I just use the grow lights instead because they're nicer, and if I'm turning lights on, I may as well use them for my plants. One last thing about grow lights, I do have a video that I did, I think in February of this year, where I went through and I explained all of the different grow lights I had in my collection, how long I had them on for, what their light output was, and showed everything, as well as sharing all of my affiliate links and discount codes, because I do have links for lots of these things. I have that video. I will link that down below in the description if you want like my full deep dive into grow lights and figuring out which one works best for you. That is down there. I have gotten a few since that aren't in that video, but one of them is this one that I've just talked about now, and I've just got a couple other smaller ones here and there, but that is my main deep dive where I talk about pretty much all of the main ones. The next thing that I want to do is water and fertilize my plants. I know some people recommend that you stop fertilizing your plants over the autumn and winter, and yes, you absolutely can stop. There's no one's stopping you from stopping, but I do continue to fertilize throughout this time because my plants are living in an artificial environment. I've got the heat on, I've got grow lights on, it's more humidity than normal, and so a lot of the time during winter, my plants are still growing, and if they're still growing, they can still use nutrients, and so I continue to feed throughout the winter. If your plants stop growing, if they go into dormancy, or if they even slow down, or even if you just don't fancy fertilizing them, you don't need to fertilize them, and that is totally fine. But I am going to continue just because that is what I do and always have done. The fertilizer I'm currently using is the Nurture System. I'm still really new with it. I don't really know. I've not been able to say for sure if I've seen results in anything, but we can go ahead and use this. I will say this stuff does actually smell quite nice. I've grown to quite like the smell of it. One thing I want to mention while we are here is that when you are filling up your watering can, you want to make sure that you're not using super duper cold water. This time of year, the water comes from the tap a whole lot colder than it does in the summer. And so I like to use my finger to measure the temperature and make sure it's not too hot, not too cold, just a sort of like room temperature feeling. And that will allow my plants to not get shocked by water either too cold or too warm. So just be careful when you are watering. It's important to note that you're probably going to be watering your plants less frequently during this time of year. When it is cooler and darker, your plants aren't going to be using as much moisture in general, and so you'll need to water them less frequently. So that is kind of a big change on our part that happens during the change of seasons. I personally like to go in with my finger as a moisture meter just to see and feel the soil moisture. You could also do it with a moisture meter. I don't tend to use those very much anymore just because I always have my fingers on me, and so it's much easier to just kind of stick my finger into the soil and feel it and feel whether or not it needs a bit more water, which they might not all need because it is a different season, and plants, especially big ones, I find dry out a whole lot slower during this time than the ones in the itty bitty pots. Those tend to dry out quicker throughout the year, let alone during this wintry time. Also, the ones you have in semi-hydro, sorry I can barely see this, the ones you have in semi-hydro will need water less frequently as well, and it is especially important for those ones to make sure you are not watering with cold water or letting them get too cold, because it'll lead to a bad time and it could lead to them having a higher risk of rot. So it is important to not leave them sitting cold too much. But I am watering these plants today in hopes that early next week I can do the nematodes that I've been meaning to do for a little bit now. Basically, I've been seeing fungus gnats more throughout my collection lately, especially in the moss poles, but that makes sense because things are taking longer to dry out, the soil is more moist, there's more chance of fungus being in the soil, more chance of fungus gnats. So I've noticed the population of fungus gnats in my home rising a little bit, and so I need to do something about that, and my method of getting rid of them is through beneficial nematodes. I have a whole video on those if you want to watch it. I'll put it up in the clickable eye. Highly recommend, because that is the most ecologically friendly way of getting rid of them. Basically, you mix this powder, which is actually a bunch of tiny nematodes, into your water, and you water your plants with it, and those nematodes will swim around eating the fungus gnat eggs and larvae, and you will see a decrease in the population. But what's really important is that the soil needs to at least be somewhat wet or damp before that, because the little nematode wormy like things go around in the film around the soil and like travel through that and seek out the fungus gnats to eat. So if my collection is moist to begin with, I can better put the nematodes in then. I should also mention I use nematodes twice a year, so pretty much on a 6-monthly basis, at the beginning of autumn and at the beginning of spring, and that pretty much deals with the problem year round. I can't really get rid of all of the fungus gnats in my collection because I have far too many plants for that, and so they're almost always going to be able to find somewhere. But I don't like, when there's just 1 or 2 around, it's not really that bothersome. I only really notice it at those sort of 6 monthly points where they start to get a lot and I'm noticing them all the time. And that's when I do the nematodes. And I will have a link for those down below in the description as well. I feel like I'm just linking a bunch of stuff for you. But it's all really good things that I use. Ooh, there's one. Things that I use on the regular, and I would recommend that you use too if you wanted to. Let me go through, refill this up, and water throughout my cabinet at the minute. And then I think I also need to water the office. Should I just go around and water everything? Let's go around and have a bit of a water montage. I can water everything. Y'all should know that I did water my cacti and succulents this weekend as well, and I still haven't cleaned up on top of the Millsbow. That I am going to do after the plant swap this weekend, because there's some plants in there that I'm going to be bringing with me to that, so I don't think it quite makes sense to clean it up before I do that. I'm just finding another reason to procrastinate. It's fine. It doesn't need to be clean. But taking time to clean over this sort of transition period is a good thing to do if you have the capacity for it. Doing a nice fall clean, not a spring clean, but a fall clean is good. Cleaning your windows will also help increase the amount of light that you can get into your home, and dusting your leaves as well is a huge thing that you can do to help your plants photosynthesize better. I am not doing that today. I don't think I still quite have the full capacity to do all of those things, but I can do some more basic tasks. But if you do have the abilities and capacity to dust and clean your windows, highly recommend it to benefit your plants. Also, while you are dusting, you can take that time to have a look at your plants and inspect them, check for pests, because it is during these sort of transitional times when I find pests to be the most rampant. I don't know, it's just how it seems to be, and so it's a good time when you're dusting your plants to check up on them for pests and make sure that they don't have any. I think I've watered these more recently than I have some of my other plants, and so they're not necessarily going to need, yeah, that's still moist. They're not going to need watering because they have been watered more freshly. And that one could. This is why it's important to check though, because if I just went around and watered everything in my whole collection, I would probably be not necessarily overwatering these, but I could very well, very easily overwater some of these. One thing that I do always do though is water my moss poles. These things I definitely want to be nice and moist before I use the nematodes next week, because they're the hardest to get out of moss poles, and it's just what I'm gonna have to deal with, I think. One thing that I don't have to do, but you should probably do if you haven't already, is bring plants in if you have summered them outside. I don't have any outdoor space, so there's no possible way I could put my plants outside, but you want to be bringing them back inside when the evening temperatures, the night temperatures are going down below, like, I think 10 Celsius or 50 Fahrenheit. That is the point at which they probably won't be happy with you or could suffer some cold damage. So you'd want to be bringing them in before the temperatures get to that point outside. It's probably happened already, at least it has in the UK. So if you haven't brought your plants inside, I would suggest doing that sooner rather than later. When you do though, you want to make sure that you're being very, very careful and checking those plants when you bring them in, because they've been outside and they're probably more likely to have access to pests, or pests will have had access to them. And so you want to be making sure that you are checking them very thoroughly when you bring them in, and probably showering them off as well, just in case. You don't want to be bringing pests into your home if you can at all help it. Otherwise, you'll probably be moving plants around within your home during this time as well, whether that be bringing plants closer to windows to give them more access to light, or actually pulling plants away from windows as well. I know that seems a little bit counterintuitive, but especially in the UK, if you've got single glazing, if your plant leaves are up against the windows touching them, the windows are going to be very cold and your plants could suffer damage with that. Also, if your windows are drafty at all, if they're not like completely sealed, those drafts could be really detrimental to your plants and cause them cold damage. Also, in the UK, or at least in my home, the radiators tend to be right beneath the windows, and so any plants right up next to a radiator, you'll want to be moving that away from the radiator, because they'll probably be turning on soon if they haven't already, and you'll not want your plants to burn by being too close to a hot radiator. But also, with central heating coming on and the radiators coming on, your house is probably going to be a bit more on the drier side. Central heating dries out your home, and so if you have loads of tropical houseplants that like the humidity a bit higher, you might need to do something to boost the humidity. In general, my home tends to stay fairly humid because I have so many plants, but if you do want to boost it, you can get a humidifier, you can set out pebble trays, group plants together to naturally boost humidity. Or I have seen radiator humidifiers. I think they're like a little ceramic pot that you put on your radiator, and you fill that with water and it'll just evaporate throughout the day. You can do something like that. You could literally put a jar next to a radiator as well if you wanted a jar of water, and that can be used to help hydrate the air. You also don't have to. Just be careful if you do have things that are really humidity loving. Just keep an eye on them and check for signs of like too low humidity on them, making sure they're not getting too dry and crispy, basically. It's also super common for leaves to yellow this time of year and your plants to die back a little bit. I've just pulled off some yellow leaves from my golden pothos. I feel like that almost always has some sort of yellowing leaves, but that is completely normal this time of year. It's not something to worry about. So if you are noticing that happening at a bit of an increased rate, do not fret. It is fairly normal. Only if you're noticing sort of new leaves coming out and being yellow off the bat, that's when you should worry. Or if your plant loses all of its leaves, then you should be worried. But 1 or 2 yellow leaves here and there isn't a problem. You can just pull them off usually or chop them off. You can also take this time to do some pruning if you have like any excess growth from this year, from the growing season that's just passed. You can go ahead and cut some plants, cut the tops off them, and prune them a little bit. I tend not to do that. I tend to just generally not prune my plants, but that's just a me thing. It's totally personal preference. The last thing that I want to touch on is repotting and propagating in these cooler autumn-winter months. Some people suggest that you don't do it during this time because it can be harder on your plants. And while that is true, I think if your plants need to be repot, if they're crying out for a repot them. They will generally be happier if you do that than if you wait until springtime, especially if your house is warm and you've got grow lights and you're continuing to fertilize. Your plants might still need a repot, and it is absolutely fine to repot during this time. I have no worries about it. It might take a tiny bit longer to bounce back just because it is slightly cooler and darker, but I really wouldn't worry about it too much. Same goes with propagating. Propagation might be a little bit slower during this time, especially something like water propagation, where the water is generally going to be a bit cooler temperatured. It'll be slower, but doesn't mean you can't do it. You can, it just takes a little bit longer for the process, or if you're taking cutting, it might take slightly longer for the plant to form a new growth point or something like that. It's not something that I avoid during the non-growing season. You can do it all year round. There's nothing saying that you can't. It might just be ever so slightly slower to recover. And when I say recover, I like, hopefully when you're repotting, you're not like hella traumatizing your plant anyway, so it shouldn't be having that much to recover from. So yeah, that is kind of my autumn tips / doing some autumn plant chores and getting my own collection prepared for this time of year. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up down below and leave a comment on other houseplanty things you'd like me to talk about in the future, and subscribe for more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to keep growing. Bye!